Hello everyone, so today we are going to learn how AI can help us in performing the DFIR, the Digital Forensics and Incident Response. And we are going to learn this through a very interactive Try Hack Me room called AI Forensics. So, what is the storyline of this room is that there is a company called 𝑊𝑎𝑡𝑐ℎ, and that company produces some softwares. And the owner name is Rob House. And one day that owner, Rob House, was sleeping in his room peacefully, enjoying his dreams. Suddenly he received a call from his SOC team. And the SOC team informed the founder that they have received some off-the-clock logins and other suspicious behaviors on their production server. And remember that production server contains the backend code of the software which that company sells. The founder Rob House is now worried that whether the attacker has compromised their production server or not, or whether the attackers have exfiltrated and stolen the code, the backend code present on that production server or not. The founder wants you to perform DFIR and let him know that whether the production server was compromised or not, and whether the code present on that production server was exfiltrated or not. And you and I are going to do this with the help of AI. So first start the machine given in this room. I've already started it and opened that machine here. Now how to start our investigation? Remember that the SOC team informed us about some authorization attempts. Off-the-clock logins means someone has tried to log in into the server outside of office hours. So we know that there is a default file in Linux called auth.log. This is the file which basically contains all the authorization attempts. Whether they are unsuccessful or successful, all those entries are normally present in this file. So what we have to do, first of all, give this command in your machine provided. So that will enable a virtual environment for us. So virtual environment is a topic of some other time, but you can simply Google it. So after activating a virtual environment, what we have to do is we have to read those log files in order to know if there has been any login attempts or not, especially the successful ones. So here we can see the log file is a bit huge, and in order to read all of those lines accurately, it will take some time. Here the first part of AI comes in, that we can simply provide those log files to AI and ask him about whether there are any suspicious entries in that file or not. So let me open ChatGPT and paste that logs here and ask him that if there are any malicious entries here. This is what you're going to do practically. So definitely, as you can see, the ChatGPT is going to inform you if he has found any entries, any malicious behavior or not. So as far as this room is concerned, what they have done is that they have provided us with a local AI model called logmodel.joblib. So this is the local AI model which we are going to use and confirm whether there are any malicious entries present or not. They have also provided us with a Python script called classify_logs.py. So what this script simply does is that it takes a log file from you and it provides that log file to the AI model present here. And then the AI model let us know whether there have been any malicious entries or not. So what we are simply going to do is to copy that command and paste it here. So as you can see, that was pretty quick. That AI model has pointed us 3 malicious entries. So what was happening that someone tried to log in as an admin and that attempt failed. But then the user J Morgan was able to successfully log in, and then after some time the user R House, which is the admin of this server, which is the root of this server, he was also able to log in into that server. And remember, both the J Morgan and R House, they both have denied any activity on that server. So it definitely means that the hacker has successfully compromised both these accounts on that server, essentially meaning that he totally compromised, he totally owned the server. Now the question for us is that how that happened in the first place, because we can see initially the user J Morgan was compromised. Now we want to know how the user J Morgan was compromised initially. This is where the second part of AI comes in, and AI is going to let us know the possible entry points. In this room, they have provided us with another Python file called fileanomalies.py. So if you simply cat that file, what is basically happening is that Python file is calling another AI model called filemodel.joblib. And what this model does is that it takes some files and folders from you and let you know about any malicious entries in them. So the default file and folders which this tool is going to check are these one. So let's simply run that tool. So as we can see, this Python script has scanned those directories and it has let us know some suspicious files. And this is something which we cannot do using ChatGPT easily. And here comes the importance of the local AI models. If you want to know more about how to deploy those local AI models on your system and identify the malicious files runtime on your production servers, let me know, I'll create a video for you. So for now, we have to remember all those files because they have been mentioned as malicious and suspicious by our AI model, and we have to check all those files one by one. So what I can simply do is to take screenshot of all those files so that I can check them later one by one. As mentioned in this room, eventually after checking all those files, you will come across this file. And when you're going to cat this file, you can see what this file was supposed to be, an invoice dump, some kind of billing and sales related data. But what we are seeing here is not an invoice dump, but some actual system commands running here and their outputs. Now let's start reading this invoice_dump file one by one. So the first line mentioned here shows that below few lines are from the bash history of a compromised user, and the user went into its invoice directory present in documents directory. In that invoice directory there was a file called .ods and it was run by that user using LibreOffice. Now if you simply Google .ods file, you will know that it's an open document spreadsheet. So basically it's kind of like an Excel file which we can open on LibreOffice. Now we know that these ODS files can be malicious as well, and we can embed some macros and scripts in them as well. So what we need to do is to find that file and read the content of that file. Now in that bash history, it is not mentioned to which user this bash history belongs to. But as we look into the auth logs before, the first user which was compromised was 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥. So it's a good indicator to go into the home folder of 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 and find that file there. So simply go to the home and 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 folder, in the documents, then in the invoices. Here we can see that ODS file present here. So if we read that ODS file, we know firsthand that there is nothing related to invoices or sale or Excel there. These are basically some plain bash scripts which were used to hack and compromise that server. So what that script is doing is that first of all creating a text file, and after creating that text file, there are multiple commands whose output was then redirected into that dump file. And in then that dump file was exfiltrated using a curl request to the attacker server. And that's how the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 was compromised, as mentioned in that room as well, that initially the attacker sent a phishing email to 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥. Now at this point the attacker might have done some initial recon and he know that the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 uses a Linux machine, and in that Linux machine that user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 uses LibreOffice, so he created a malicious ODS file. And as we can see, when the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 executed that malicious ODS files, what happened was that a lot of data related to that user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 was exfiltrated, and that helped the attacker into compromising that account. Now to be honest, instead of running all those commands, the attacker can also simply get a reverse shell through that user, as he is able to run the bash commands. But maybe in order to keep the things under the bar and maybe to be more sneaky, the attacker, instead of getting the reverse shell directly, he exfiltrated the critical content, which eventually helped him to compromise that user. So finally, we know that the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 was compromised, and the way it was compromised is that the attacker sent him a malicious ODS file which was executed by the user, and that got the user compromised. So the first part of our investigation is closed. And here you can answer the first two questions as well. The first question was, at what time the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 was compromised? Your AI model showed you that that was the time at which the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 was compromised. So the second question was, what attack method was used? We know that the presence of ODS file and the malicious content in it, so there was a strong possibility, there was a clear basically indicator that user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 was compromised using a phishing attempt. And now the third question is, what was the attacker email address which got the user hacked? By which email address the attacker emailed the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥? So normally what happens is that there is a folder in Linux called cd var mail. But if we come to that folder is empty. So what we need to do is to check the home directory of user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥. In that directory, we can see a folder called mail. Let's go to that folder, cd into inbox, and here we can see an EML file and email file. Now if we cat that email file, we can see the attacker email address, and if we read that content, that same ODS file is present here as an attachment. So that's a very classic example of a phishing attempt, that the user received a phishing email, and in that phishing email, a malicious file was present which was downloaded and executed by the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 which got it hacked. So here you can put the answer 3 as well. Now the second part of this investigation is to know how the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 escalated its privileges to the user r.house. Now the best file to look for that case is the bash history, is the history file of that user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥, because we know that the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 is now compromised and attacker is using that user to compromise the next user, which is r.house. So what we have to do is to read the file called bash_history of that user. And if we read that file, what we are seeing in this line is that the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 modified the SSH keys of the user called rhouse, and that's how he compromised that user as well. So the vulnerability here is that the security misconfiguration here is that the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 is able to modify the SSH files of another user, which leads to the account compromised of that user as well. Now if you are not able to understand this, remember that you can do SSH using two methods. The first method, the journal method, is to using the username and password, and that's how you SSH into a machine. And the second method is to use the public and private keys. So here the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 was able to modify the public keys of the user rhouse, and that is how he compromised that user. If you're still confused about that process, you can Google it, or you can simply ask me in the DM. And here the second part of the investigation is also covered, that how the user 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 switched to the user r.house. Now if you remember, there were many other files flagged as malicious and suspicious by that AI model. Now in order to save time, if we simply study that room, it tells us that many of those files were basically actual reverse shells, and they were probably used as a backdoor to maintain the persistence on that server. And here as the final part comes the important question, that whether the source code was leaked from that server or not. That was basically the actual main purpose of compromising that server in the first place. So what you have to do, if you again tally that screenshot and the output of that AI model, at point number 10, you are seeing a very unusual encrypted file with extension .enc. So if we simply go and cat that file, we can simply see that it is basically a base64 encoded string. Now again, this is the third part where AI can help us again as well. Simply copy that output, give it to ChatGPT. It first mentions that that file is suspicious because of its location and because it was hidden, and the actual part, that how to decrypt it, that first you have to base64 decrypt it, and then you have to unzip that file as well. So basically what that file is, it is a base64 encrypted zip file. So here in this room we have been presented with a command. So what the first command is doing, this command is base64 decrypting that encrypted file, and the output file is called stolen.tor.gz in the temp directory. So now if we go to the temp directory, we can see that file here, and as you can see, it's basically a tar zip file which we have to unzip it. The command for unzipping that file is also provided to us. No such file or directory, so maybe first we have to make that file. Make directory temp stolen source, and now we can run that command again, and we can see that command yield successful results. So if we go into that directory now, we can see OPT directory, and in OPT we can see Robco, and in that Robco, and that in that Robco there's a folder called engineering, and if we go into that folder engineering, there's mfboot agent, cd into it. Here finally we can see the mfboot_main.c, and if we cat that file, this is basically the actual backend file. Of course it's an example file here, but again the presence of this file shows us that the attacker got his hands on our backend critical code file, and he basically encrypted that file, and later that file was probably exfiltrated and stolen as well. So that's how we closed our case very easily using the help of AI. So again, to summarize, First, AI helps us in identifying the malicious log entries, and then AI also helped us in identifying the suspicious files, through which we came to know that how the initial compromise was happened. And finally, when we got the encrypted file, the AI also helps us to understand that file and how to decrypt it properly. So it was now clear that the production server was compromised, and J. Morgan's and R.Rob's accounts were compromised, and then the final backend actual code file which the hacker was there to steal, he basically successfully exfiltrated that code file. And then to answer the questions, which command did the attacker run as J. Morgan to gain access to the R house account? We saw in the log files that basically this was the command which helped the attacker into gaining access into the R house account. And what is the full path of archive used to steal Rob's source code? We have just seen it here. That was the full path which you are supposed to mention it here, and that's how we solve that room. As always guys, if you have any questions related to this room, and if you want to know how to run those local AI models into your machine and to identify the malicious files, please let me know. I'll be happy to help you out. Thank you so much.